The lights were bright, the air cool, and the set combat under the surface. Tension was already rising, posed to be a respectful panel discussion. The topic was American Identity in the 21st Century, hosted by one of the biggest national networks. The room was full of journalists, students, cultural leaders, and millions of Americans watching live. The producers wanted it to be honest, challenging, but safe. Karoline Leavitt was brought in for fire. She was young, sharp, and dangerous in the way that made headlines. A rising political voice on the far right, she had grown famous for bold statements, viral interviews, and picking fights no one else dared to start. Her team called her the disruptor. Her critics called her worse. Across from her sat Denzel Washington, not as a celebrity, but as a respected figure, a voice of wisdom, culture, and dignity. He wasn't there to entertain. He was there to represent something older, deeper understanding earned over decades, not through politics, but through life. The panel began smoothly enough. The host welcomed the audience, outlined the topics, and invited each guest to speak briefly. Denzel spoke first. His tone was calm, steady. He talked about dignity, about family, about what it meant to grow up in a divided country and still believe in unity. He shared a story about his mother, about a teacher who changed his life. There was weight in every word. Karoline smiled tightly, waiting for her turn. When it came, she went straight to attack. She mocked the idea of cultural trauma, called it a tool used to silence progress. She talked about hard work, about patriotism, about taking personal responsibility. Her words were sharp, each one aimed with purpose. She didn't name Denzel directly, but her tone did. Denzel responded, not with anger, but with grace. He didn't raise his voice, simply told another story, this time about a boy he met in Chicago who turned his life around after watching Fences. A boy who saw himself for the first time on screen. Karoline interrupted. "With respect, Mr. Washington," she said, "those stories are not solutions. They're Hollywood scripts." The host tried to bring things back to neutral, but the audience already sensed the change. The air had shifted. Denzel didn't bite. He just looked at her, nodded once, and said, "Sometimes truth sounds like fiction to people who've never had to live it." There was a small round of applause. Karoline didn't like that. As Denzel continued, she leaned into her microphone and muttered, just loud enough for every mic to catch it, "Sit down, boy." Silence. Not confusion, not laughter. Just silence. The kind of silence that spreads like ice. The host blinked. The producers froze. The camera crew didn't know if they were still filming what they were supposed to. The audience gasped. You could hear someone in the back whisper, "Did she just say that?" Denzel didn't speak right away. He looked at her, not with hate, not with shock, but with something deeper, sadness mixed with something else. Recognition. The host quickly tried to move on, stumbling through the next question, pretending not to have heard what everyone clearly had. But it was too late. The moment was out. The internet was already exploding. Hashtags were trending. Clips were being cut and shared. Everyone had heard it. Everyone was watching. Denzel adjusted his microphone slowly. He looked toward the audience, then back at Karoline. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "I've been called boy by men, afraid of the man I was becoming," he said. "Now I'm called it again, by someone afraid of what I represent." The room didn't move. Denzel wasn't done. "I don't stand here today as a Hollywood actor. I stand here as a man, as a son, as a father, as someone who's earned the right to speak in this room without being told to sit down." Karoline tried to speak, but the host motioned for her mic to be lowered. She looked around, confused. Suddenly, the power balance had shifted. Denzel ended with one line. "Respect isn't something you give to people who agree with you. It's something you showed because of who you are." The host looked into the camera, stunned. "We're going to take a short break," he said. But the damage was done. Backstage, producers scrambled. Legal teams were on the phone. Network executives were already calculating fallout. Sponsors were panicking. Public relations managers were writing statements before the commercial even started. Karoline was escorted off the stage, not officially, but clearly. Denzel sat quietly, sipping water. He had said all he needed to. Across the country, people were glued to their screens, some in shock, some in silence, some cheering, some angry. But no one, not one person, was looking away. And in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't just a TV moment. This was something else. This was the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. Outside the studio, the air was thick with noise. Protesters, reporters, bodyguards. Video clip had gone viral in under 10 minutes. News anchors were already labeling it the moment. Some called it brave, others called it disgraceful. But one thing was clear, no one was ignoring it. Karoline Leavitt stood in a narrow hallway behind the stage, speaking rapidly into her phone. "It's fine," she told someone. "We'll flip this. We say he overreacted. Play the victim card." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. She knew the cameras had caught everything. Her aide approached. "We've got senators texting. Some are pulling support. Others say this is a golden opportunity. They want you on Tucker tonight." Full spin. Karoline didn't respond. She was staring at the television in the green room. Denzel was still on air.com. Powerful. The audience hadn't left. No one had. They were listening to every word. Then her phone buzzed again, this time. Not a call, a message. Unknown sender. Simply read, "You woke it up. And now we all burn." She froze. Her face paled. The aide noticed. "What is it?" Karoline didn't answer. She walked to a corner and read the message again. Then she opened her private app, the one with encrypted contacts. She typed in a number labeled locked. Do not call. She stared at it for a moment, then carefully deleted the message. Burn the trail. Crosstown, in a dimly lit office inside a federal building with no sign on the door, two men watched the live broadcast in silence. They weren't journalists. They weren't fans. They were operatives. One leaned forward, eyes fixed on Denzel's face. "You saw it, right?" he said. The moment she said it, the other replied, "No." The moment he looked back at her, the first man nodded. He recognized her, not as a politician, as something else. They both fell silent again. Then the phone rang. "Asset 17 has been reactivated," a voice said from the speaker. "Get him under watch immediately." Meanwhile, Denzel Washington walked off the stage calmly. But inside, something had shifted. He wasn't just upset. He was calculating. That phrase, "sit down, boy," wasn't just disrespectful. It was familiar. Too familiar. He had heard it once before, decades ago, in a hidden room in Virginia, in a military base that no longer appeared on maps. Back then, he had been much younger, not yet famous, just a soldier. A voice for a country that didn't always want to hear what he had to say. Back then, she had been younger too, child. But she was there. And now here she was again, all grown up, using the same words her father once used before vanishing from history. He sat alone in his dressing room, pulling out an old notebook from his coat. Inside were pages of names, phrases, coordinates, things no one ever talks about on camera. On the final page, one line was now underlined twice. Project Dagger. If it breathes again, silence won't be an option. His phone buzzed. Unknown caller. No number, just the words, status, green light. He stared at the message, then locked the phone. A knock at the door. It was his manager. "Denzel, you need to see this." He followed her to the hallway. On a mounted TV screen, news anchors were panicking, not just over the insult, but something else. A retired general had tweeted, then deleted, a cryptic post. The boy has returned, and he remembers. Commentators were guessing it meant Denzel. But some older voices, the ones from the Cold War years, they weren't so sure. They recognized it as something more dangerous, something from the files, from the classified side. Back at the network headquarters, Karoline was already being prepped for spin, makeup team, PR agents, lights. But her mind wasn't in the room. She kept hearing that phrase again. You woke it up. She had said those words on purpose. She wanted to trigger him. What she didn't realize was the phrase was also a key, and it had opened something locked for decades. Behind the control room, a junior producer ran into her boss's office. "Sir, someone's trying to hack the server. They're targeting the uncut feed, the part we never aired." The few seconds between his walk-off and her reaction. Boss looked pale. Pull the plug now, but it was too late. Somewhere in the chaos, someone had already downloaded the raw feed. And in those 5 seconds of off-air recording, Denzel had said one more thing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant for cameras. He looked into the dark corner of the studio where no one stood and whispered, "I know you're watching, and I'm ready now." The nation didn't know it yet. But what started as a television argument was about to unlock one of the most dangerous secrets buried in America's shadow history. 3 hours after the show ended, the footage had spread to every corner of the internet. Commentators from every network were analyzing the insult. Some blamed Karoline. Others accused Denzel of overreacting. But deeper in the digital chaos, a quiet movement began. Anonymous accounts started posting strange clips, not just from the panel, but from archived broadcasts, classified hearings, and deleted footage from decades ago. In one, a younger Denzel appeared in military fatigues, not acting, but speaking at a closed briefing in 1989. He spoke about surveillance programs, off-books missions, and something called Project Dagger. No one had seen this before. Karoline sat in her hotel room, lights off, eyes fixed on the TV. Her aide, nervous, kept pacing. "If you need to get ahead of this," he said. She didn't answer. He continued. "Denzel hasn't responded publicly, but intel chatter is picking up. Former NSA officials are coming out of retirement. Something's moving." She looked at him, finally. "Tell me the name again." He hesitated. "Project Dagger." "No," she said. "The one," he whispered. Before the cameras cut. "What did he say?" The aide swallowed. "He said, 'I know you're watching, and I'm ready now.'" Karoline stood up and walked to the window. She didn't know who he was talking to, but she had a guess. Because she'd grown up hearing that voice, not on television, but through the thin walls of secure government. Buildings. Her father had once whispered that same phrase on a late-night call with men she wasn't supposed to know existed. Back then, she was only 10, but she remembered. Across the country in Langley, Virginia, a red phone rang in a secure room. No name, no location, just a blinking light. A man in a suit answered. He confirmed. The voice on the other end replied, "Yes," verbatim. "Is Dagger stable?" The line crackled. "That depends on what?" The agent asked on whether Karoline meant to trigger it, or if she doesn't know what she's done. The agent leaned back. "Get me Ford and get me Washington. They need to meet." In a quiet airport hangar on the outskirts of D.C., Denzel sat alone in a small lounge room, waiting. An older man entered, graybeard, heavy eyes. Harrison Ford. The two men didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. They'd met once, long ago, in the ruins of a failed operation the government had erased from public memory. Ford spoke first. "You said the phrase." Denzel nodded. "She forced it." "Then it's live now," Ford said. "That file's going to surface." "And when it does, she doesn't know what it is," Denzel interrupted. "She's playing politics, not knowing she's playing with ghosts." Ford looked tired. "They're not just ghosts. Some of them are still breathing." Meanwhile, inside a cyber operations unit in Nevada, a satellite pinged a digital beacon. An off-grid signal, first registered in 2003. It's come online again for the first time in 22 years. Its source: a dormant server buried in an underground base outside Montana. A young analyst turned to her supervisor. "Sir, it's transmitting. To where?" She paused. "To Berlin." And to a private signal bouncing off a decommissioned relay on the edge of Ukraine. Her boss frowned. "Who the hell is listening?" Back in New York, Karoline was being interviewed by a major news outlet. The questions were soft image repair, the standard routine. But mid-interview, she paused, hearing something strange through her earpiece static. Then a whisper. "You can't control what you've released." She ripped the earpiece out. The host looked confused. "Is everything all right, Congresswoman?" She faked a smile. "It's just interference." But she knew it wasn't. That voice had said the exact same thing to her father on the last day she saw him alive. Later that night, Denzel met with a retired journalist in a quiet diner on the edge of Baltimore. The man was old but sharp. "She knew this would come back," the journalist said. "You've been warning people for years." No one listened. "They listened," Denzel replied. "They just didn't believe. It's what happens now." Denzel looked out the window, then back at him. "We prepare," he said. "If that file leaks, the American public won't be debating culture wars anymore. They'll be asking what their country was really doing behind their backs for the last 40 years. Is it that bad?" Denzel nodded. "It's worse." The next morning, Washington, D.C. didn't feel like itself. Something in the air had changed. Journalists outside Capitol Hill were strangely silent, not shouting questions. Several White House press staffers were seen leaving the building early. No briefings, no smiles, just silence. Inside a locked government archive below the Library of Congress, a vault door opened for the first time in decades. 3 men entered, carried federal clearance, yet none spoke. One wore the seal of the Department of Defense. Another, the insignia of Homeland Security. The third, no visible badge at all. In the center of the vault was an old metal cabinet, faded paint. One word scratched into the corner: dagger. The third man typed a 6-digit code. The cabinet clicked. Open. Inside were 3 items. A red folder. It's a black and white photo of 2 men in military gear. One of them clearly Harrison Ford. A flash drive. The man with no badge said only one word: leak it. Across the country at a small private university in Chicago, a class of journalism students sat frozen. Their professor Midlichter had just projected a video onto the wall. An unlisted link suddenly live on the dark web. It was raw footage, grainy, time-stamped 1986. A young soldier in a classified compound is delivering a report. But the real shock was in the nameplate. LTD Washington. Students whispered. "That's him." "No way." "Wait, is this real?" The professor didn't answer. He was too busy filming the screen with his phone. In New York, Karoline Leavitt was being rushed into a secure black SUV outside her hotel. Her aide held up a phone showing the footage. She stared. "That's not supposed to exist," she whispered. Her aide nodded. "It does now." "But why release it?" she asked. "Because someone wants the public to know what he did." "And what you triggered?" She looked at him, eyes sharp. "We need to meet them." "Who?" She took a breath. "The ones still alive." In a hangar on the outskirts of Colorado, Denzel stood alone beside a cargo plane. His coat blew in the wind as Harrison Ford stepped down from the ramp. "You saw it?" Ford asked. Denzel nodded. "The files live. The footage is spreading." "And her?" Ford asked. "She's rattled," Denzel said. "But I don't think she understands what's really coming." Ford looked toward the mountains. "She doesn't need to understand. She just needs to survive what's next." Back in Berlin, inside a cyber intelligence bunker formerly used by NATO, an encrypted message hit the inbox of a forgotten terminal. A retired CIA officer reading a book on his couch jolted upright as his old phone, long thought deactivated, began to ring. He answered without a word. A voice said, Operation Dagger has been reopened. Phase 2 has begun. Who triggered? It. The voice paused. The girl and the actor, still on mission. He hung up. In a coffee shop in Georgia, a blogger named Rhea Harper sat at her laptop, cross-referencing leaked files with old congressional testimonies. She'd been tracking something called the ECHO Directive for Munza Government Silence Protocol, from the 80s designed to neutralize civilian witnesses after failed foreign operations. Now, for the first time, names were showing up in decrypted files. One caught her eye. Senator Walter Leavitt. Her fingers froze. Karoline's father, Rhea's breath shortened. She clicked through more files, photos, witness logs, internal memos. In one photo, dated June 1989, a young Karoline is seen standing behind her father, next to Harrison Ford. In uniform, she slammed her laptop shut. "They're all connected," she whispered. She opened Twitter and began to post. Hashtag Echo Directive, hashtag Dagger Leak, hash Leavitt Files. The tags exploded within minutes. In D.C., the White House Situation Room buzzed. With tension, the general pointed to a digital map. Satellite pings confirm movement near old storage facilities in Alaska, one of the original Dagger bunkers. "Why now?" President asked. An intelligence officer replied quietly, "Because the last time we silenced this, it cost American lives. Maybe someone inside wants the truth this time." The president leaned forward. "Find out if Ford and Washington are still coordinating." The officer hesitated. "Are they? They never stopped, sir." Meanwhile, Karoline sat alone in a safe house in Virginia. She held an old photograph, one she had kept hidden for years. Her father shaking hands with a man in shadow. Behind them, a helicopter bearing no national flag. She looked into the mirror. "They think I don't know what this is about," she whispered. "But I've always known." She pulled out a burner phone, tapped a hidden number, and waited. A voice answered. "You shouldn't be calling. They've activated Dagger," she said. "I know. Then it's time," Karoline said. "You told me if it ever came back, you'd help finish it." The line went silent for a second. Then, "Meet me in Montana." As night fell across the nation, the headlines turned from celebrity gossip to national concern. Leaked military. Footage suggests hidden history of political operatives. Denzel Washington's ties to Project Dagger, real or fabricated? Who was Senator Leavitt really working for? The meeting place was an abandoned ranger station deep in the woods of Montana. No signs, no service. Just tall pines and the sound of the wind brushing against history. Karoline stepped out of the SUV and scanned the area. Her contact was already there, gray beard, long coat eyes that had seen war, politics, and betrayal in equal measure. He didn't speak at first. He just held out an old steel briefcase. "You're late," he finally said. Karoline took the case and opened it. Inside were photographs, maps, a few faded cassette tapes, and a red index card with 2 handwritten words. "Ford Protocol. So it's real," she said softly. "Not just real," the man replied. "It never ended." She looked at him. "Then why now? Why leak it?" He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Because Denzel triggered something we couldn't stop. The moment he went off script. When he answered you with those words on live television, he didn't just protect his dignity. He sent a signal." Karoline frowned. "To who?" "To everyone who was part of it. Everyone who buried the truth and swore they'd take it to the grave." She stared down at the tapes. One was labeled Echo Briefing -1989. Another, Ford Intercept Load 7A. She turned to him. "What do these prove?" He gave a bitter smile. "That your father wasn't just a senator, he was a handler. That Ford wasn't just an actor. He was sent into foreign territories under a non-official cover. And Denzel? He was the ghost in the system. He got out before it consumed him." She closed the briefcase slowly. "And me. You were the contingency plan. Silence. Suddenly, the sound of rotors overhead. Not military, but close. 2. Drones circling? They found us, he said, calm but grim. You need to run. Karoline backed away as the man tossed a flare and scattered the contents of the briefcase into a nearby fire pit. Papers caught flame. Tapes melted. But the cardboard protocol she slipped into her coat pocket before turning and running into the woods. Elsewhere, in a remote cabin in Alaska, Denzel Washington sat beside a fireplace with Harrison Ford. Both men were older now, slower, but not out of the game. Ford poured a drink. They've activated the drones. I know. Denzel said they're after her. She's not ready. She's more ready than we were when they threw us into the field at 21. Ford looked at him. You think she's trying to help? I think, Denzel said, she just found out she's not the villain in the story. And that scares the people who wrote the script. A knock on the door. Both men stood. A woman entered, young, nervous. She carried a small box with a USB drive inside. I pulled this from the NOAA satellites last night, she said. Ford took it and plugged it into a protected terminal. The screen blinked a live video feeds, coordinates, radio frequencies. Denzel leaned in. That's the old code base. This is Dagger's Mirrornet. Ford's jaw tightened. They never shut it down. Back in Washington, D.C., the president sat in a closed meeting with key intelligence advisors. They've gone rogue, a military official said. Ford and Washington are building alliances again. Another voice added, and Leavitt cheese. No longer useful. She's off script and exposing nodes we thought were cold. The president looked tired. Do we engage? Was hesitation. Then they know where the servers are. Those files hit the public, we won't be able to control the narrative. The president nodded slowly. Greenlight the sweep. Within the hour, across 6 states, black vehicles moved. Communications centers were quietly shut down. Civilian analysts disappeared from their posts. A small radio station in Wyoming was burned to the ground. And still, on underground networks, fragments of the files leaked anyway. Tweets went out, #Echo Directive equals domestic ops since 1986. Who ordered the silence? Was Ford ever really an actor? In the woods, Karoline reached a payphone on the edge of a forgotten highway. She punched in a long-coded number. Rhea Harper answered. You were right, Karoline said. Everything. It's real. Rhea, back in Chicago, froze. Then they'll come for you. And for me. Karoline's voice shook, but remained steady. Then, let's finish it. Suddenly, from behind her, headlights. It's an old pickup truck. Pulled up slowly. The window rolled down. Harrison Ford. Get in, he said. We don't have much time. She hesitated for only a moment. Once inside, Denzel turned in the passenger seat. You have one last chance to walk away, he said. She met his gaze. I walked in the moment. I said, sit down, boy. I just didn't know it yet. They drove into the night. From the rear window, a drone watched, ready for the final part 6. The truck drove through the night. No GPS, no phones. Just old maps and memory. Harrison Ford at the wheel, Karoline, silent in the back, and Denzel Washington watching the tree line like a soldier back in hostile ground. Karoline finally spoke. Where are we going? Ford didn't look at her. To where it began, Denzel added, and where it has to end. They stopped at a compound deep in the hills of West Virginia. Faded fences, security cameras broken. Years ago. It looked abandoned, but Karoline could feel something inside: energy, memory, maybe danger. This used to be a State Department safe house, Ford said. It hasn't been on any map since 1994. They entered quietly. Dust-covered furniture. Old typewriters. A shelf lined with tapes and documents wrapped in red tape. Karoline stepped toward one and picked it up. The label read, Echo Directive, Live Trials. She looked at Denzel. You were part of this. He nodded slowly, not by choice. Ford pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Inside, photographs of world leaders, journalists, even celebrities marked with status codes. Some said cleared, others suppressed. Karoline flipped through and stopped at one photo. It was her father. Why is he listed as handler? C-17. Denzel sat down, his voice calm. Your father didn't just shape narratives. He built them. What the public saw interviews, media scandals, political debates, many were planned. He believed America needed a storyline. Karoline's hands trembled. So everything, the shows, the leaks, the clashes, were all scripted. Not all, Ford said, but enough to control the temperature, make people fight over noise, keep them away from the signal. And me? She asked. What was I in all this? Ford looked away. Denzel answered, You were the reset. Silence. Suddenly, the lights flickered. An old landline rang. Ford grabbed it. Yeah, a voice on the other end, garbled, masked. They're already inside the fence. He hung up. We have less than 5 minutes. Karoline rushed to copy files onto a drive. Denzel opened a rusted locker and pulled out a black case. Inside was a secure transmitter. Ford keyed in. A code. We upload everything. The names, the directives. Even the classified memos. Once it's out, they're no more hiding. Karoline inserted the USB. A loading bar began, uploading one of 147 files. Gunshots outside. They're not sending. Police, Denzel said. They're sending cleaners. Suddenly, a blast shook the compound. Dust fell from the ceiling. Karoline looked at the screen. 56 files uploaded. Almost there, Ford said. She turned to him. Why did you come back? After all these years. Ford didn't answer at first, then, because I watched too many people get erased. Good people, whistleblowers, veterans, teachers, even actors. I was one of the lucky ones. I got to hide behind characters. But Denzel, he never ran. Denzel smiled faintly. I had a different kind of cover. Boom, another blast. It's one closer. Karoline checked the feed. 92 files. She looked at Denzel. When I said those words to you on stage, sit down, boy, why didn't you fight back? He looked straight into her eyes. Because I've learned. The loudest person isn't always the strongest. Sometimes silence hits harder than rage. She blinked, ashamed. He continued, and sometimes when a system feeds you a script, you have to speak a different language. A siren pierced the air. Red lights now filled the compound from outside. Black figures advanced. Silencers. Body armor. Ford locked the door. They'll be through in 60 seconds. The screen showed 99%. Complete and then upload successful. Karoline ejected the drive and smashed the terminal with a fire extinguisher. We go, Denzel said. I moved to a back tunnel. Narrow, damp, dark. Old escape route from Cold War days. Behind them, the front door exploded, shouts, flashbangs. But the trio had already slipped through the forest, disappearing beneath the night's blanket. At a hidden airstrip 10 miles away, a small plane waited. They boarded, no questions. Just wind and speed and silence. In the cockpit, a voice came through the radio. Download confirmed. Servers in Brazil and Norway received the dump. It's out. Ford nodded. Then we're ghosts again. Karoline sat in the back, staring out at the stars. I thought I was leading the story, she whispered. Denzel sat beside her. You were? You just didn't know which chapter you belonged to yet. She turned to him. And what now? He gave a quiet smile. Now we let the truth do the talking. As the plane disappeared into the clouds, TV networks buzzed to life. Breaking news. Files leaked. Congressmen named. Presidents exposed. The signal had broken through the noise. And the world would never be the same. By morning, the world had changed. The documents were everywhere on encrypted forums, global news feeds, and even public university websites. Governments tried to shut them down, but it was too late. Mirrors spread across continents. The full truth was out. Project Equa, multi-decade psychological operation. A quiet war fought through media. Talk shows, scripted debates, and cultural manipulation. The public had always believed they were watching reality. Now they knew they were watching theater. In Washington, chaos erupted. A dozen resignations came within hours. Intelligence agencies blamed each other. A classified emergency session was held underground, but nothing could put the genie back. CNN played Harrison Ford's final interview clip on repeat. It's still classified, Jimmy, and it's still active. Commentators dissected Karoline Leavitt's walk-off, Denzel Washington's speech, and the coded phrases hidden in their arguments. Language analysts confirmed the key phrases had been part of a dormant Cold War protocol reactivated the moment. Karoline said, "The signal doesn't die." Newsrooms around the world tried to understand what they were seeing, but while they argued, quiet war was happening in the background. Whistleblowers emerge, dozens of them. Former show producers, intelligence agents embedded in entertainment networks. Even one ex-president's chief of staff admitted he had approved the Echo. Budget 5 years earlier. Some called it treason, others called it justice. Meanwhile, far from the noise, Karoline, Ford, and Denzel had gone dark again. They weren't hiding. They were waiting. In a small, safe house on neutral ground. A remote island known only to a few, the three sat in silence. Karoline opened a laptop. A private video call connected. On the other end was a journalist from Al Jazeera. "Are you ready?" the reporter asked. Ford nodded. "Release the next phase." She clicked a file. It was a full, unedited footage archive over 700 hours of enhanced media events. Raw clips showing how debates were cut, questions planted, reactions rehearsed. A treasure trove of truth. The journalist froze. "This will set fires across every newsroom." "That's the point," Karoline said quietly. "Let the world burn, but let it burn clean." The call ended. Denzel poured coffee for the three of them. "They'll come for us." "They already did," Ford answered. "Now they'll come for each other." Karoline looked out the window at the ocean. "My father believed America needed a script, that chaos had to be curated." Denzel replied, "But truth isn't chaos, it's light." She nodded slowly. Suddenly, a knock on the door. They tensed. Ford reached for a weapon under the table. Karoline moved toward the window. Another knock. Gentle this time. Denzel stood. "I'll open it." It was a teenage girl, no older than 16. She held a flash drive in one hand and a note in the other. Her voice was steady. "This belongs to you. My uncle was one of the first whistleblowers. He said if anything happened to him, I had to find the people who cracked the code." Ford opened the note. Inside coordinates. And a single sentence, "Echo was only the beginning. Find Ian." Karoline blinked. "What's Ian?" Denzel stepped forward, reading over Ford's shoulder. "Something older," he whispered. "Something deeper." Ford closed the note. "Then the story isn't over." The girl looked up at them. "Will you tell the truth? All of it?" Karoline nodded. "We'll show the world what they were never meant to see." The final scenes of the story unfolded not in gunfire or explosions, but in courtrooms, on stages, and in classrooms. Protests swept across capitals. Students demanded transparency in media. Global leaders were forced to answer for years of deception. And in the middle of it all, the clip that changed everything kept playing. Denzel, seated calmly under the lights, saying, "Maybe it's not me who needs to sit down." That single moment became the symbol of the movement, a reminder that dignity was power, that silence could speak louder than violence, and that when people stop shouting and start listening, truth finds a way through. The end.